Today, the government in Harare announced a complete freeze on hiring any civil servants to stave off economic collapse. The outside world has imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe in protest at human rights abuses. Well, let's get more. Joining us via Skype from Harare is the senior lawyer Fidza Mahere, who is an advocate at the Supreme Court. A very good evening to you. So how desperate is the situation in Zimbabwe that so many are driven to head south and get out of the country? What is causing this exodus?
Well, I think it's a number of factors that are combining to create something of a crisis. We've got high rates of unemployment. Some government reports indicate over 90% unemployment. We also have a cash crisis here. And as we approach election season, we are certainly seeing more police brutality, repression, clamping down on various freedoms, freedom of speech. New legislation is being lined up to regulate the use of social media. So I think these are certainly some of the circumstances that are contributing towards this. But I think the strongest of these is the economic situation, the lack of employment, and the growth of the informal sector, which actually means that people have to do a lot more cross-border trading. There's very little productivity here in Zimbabwe, so a lot of our goods are imported, which is pushing people to cross the border.
Yes, and is that because food and goods are hard to come by, or they're just very expensive?
I think it's more to do with the fact that they're expensive. Goods coming in from South Africa are a lot cheaper than they are here. The cost of production in Zimbabwe is very high. The cost of finance, a lot of industry has closed down. All of this makes it a lot easier to buy goods from South Africa and cheaper too.
The most vulnerable women we saw in Alex Crawford's report end up, it seems, being sold, possibly also ensnared in the sex trade to pay for their crossing. How are Zimbabweans treated who do end up in South Africa?
Well, I think it varies across the spectrum. I think for a lot of the time, they don't have proper travel documents and proper identity documents, which makes them extremely vulnerable to abuse and to, labor practices that aren't desirable. But generally, we do find that a lot of them will be just looking to buy stuff from South Africa, buy goods from South Africa, and try to bring them back home for sale.
You mentioned the approaching election season. Do people want political change in Zimbabwe? Is that a possibility? There's, I know, talk of a coalition against Robert Mugabe, or is the 92-year-old still intent on holding on to power?
I think both of those propositions are true. The 92-year-old does seem bent on holding on to power, but at the same time, people do want change. And we see this both from inside the party, ZANU-PF, the ruling party, where war veterans seem to have spoken out, where there's deep factional infighting. And you also see it externally, where various opposition parties have formed a coalition. You've got a growing citizens movement, which is separate from the formal political sector, as it were, where we see citizens also speaking out and making their voice heard to basically seek a better Zimbabwe and a quest for change and some sort of progress for the country, which seems to have been a slow-burning mess for over a decade now.
Fidza Mahere, a lawyer there. Thank you very much indeed. Good to hear from you there in Harare. Thank you.
Thank you.